Okay, thank you. Little psychedelic flag there, um, with Zoom. But all right, so with that, I think our purpose here today was just to continue our work that we had started a few weeks ago on going through some of the priority lists, the goals and objectives for the strategic plan. So board members had received several pages that kind of, I think, updated some of the conversations we'd had previously. And today we were just going to kind of continue to work through some of those and refine them with the idea that that'll get pulled into the bigger document for a final document that we would tend kind of put out there for the public to get some feedback from them. And I think it'd be helpful real quickly, Cheryl, if we could talk a little bit about, because one of the core things of this plan is we wanted to have that implementation plan, right? And so I think it'd be helpful for us to talk a little bit about that before we take a deep dive into this about that next layer, because we don't want this to just sit there and have some lofty, objectives. We want to make sure that we have action items associated with all of these. So if we could talk through that, I know there's some to-dos on the town's part that we have to start organizing ourselves. But that might be helpful to have that conversation so that when the public access, everybody understands how things are kind of moving forward. Welcome, Scott. We just did the pledge, so perfect timing.
I heard your little spiel there, and you sounded exactly like the call I was just on as a consultant. So you fit right in Accenture, by the way. So
Okay, all right, great. So I'll let Cheryl kind of kick it off, and maybe we could just spend a few minutes on that.
Of course. Hi again, everyone. I'll actually show you the implementation plan, but I want to lead into it just a little bit. So for anybody that might be watching or listening that's not familiar with what we're doing, the strategic plan document is a document that's sort of the high policy level direction, the roadmap to the future. It contains the most important ideas sort of distilled into strategy. And it should be a document that would be easy to read and understand, but it doesn't contain a lot of detail on purpose because things change so rapidly and so often that the implementation plan is where the detail is contained. So the second document is, of course, the implementation plan. When you see it, it will look like a spreadsheet because it is a spreadsheet. And it's separated into your key focus areas and lists your goals and your objectives and action steps. And I want to take you to that really quickly. I just want to say this is not a finished document. Again, we want to wait till tonight where we hear if you might rearrange things or have some additional ideas before we finalize this document. But I'm going to go ahead and share screen and show you the current implementation plan in its draft format. And we just dropped right on into your modern and innovative infrastructure. So it lists what that means. And then it has each strategic goal, which will be ordered in your priority order. And then it has your objectives also listed there that you see here: smart objective, smart objective, smart objective, smart objective. And then the staff went in and had an extensive meeting around the strategic plan when it was created in the retreat. And they started actually putting action steps to these objectives. So as an example only, this is not a finished document, but if you had an objective that said provide improved town and school facilities, the staff went through and said, okay, and there were school staff involved here, what do we think some of those action steps should look like? Evaluate the accessibility of sidewalks and downtown infrastructure would be a first action step they would think about. Aligning ADA goals with the CIP to prioritize execution of that work for the ADA. And complete master facilities plan. And then if there were people that said, hey, that's something that we think we should take on, they would list their name there. And then there's a due date. Now, this due date will be an actual due date at some point. We just didn't want to write a due date in there until you all approved the plan. Otherwise, we just have to go in and change every due date. So let's assume we're going to approve the plan. And that 60 days will then turn into January 1st, 2024 would be the due date for Bill and Deb to align the ADA goals with the CIP and prioritize the execution of the work. You can see why this isn't a document that you necessarily adopt, because it's going to change. Some of these are 1 month. We did this, by the way, for every single one of them, right? Some of them are 1 month, some are 3 months, some are 2 weeks. Here are some that are going to be due quite shortly. So the way this document fits into and integrates with the strategic plan isn't just the language that we're creating tonight and refining. What it's being used as is an accountability tool, as well as a tool to update and report back to the Board of Selectmen on progress. So as you saw, we recommend that every 3 months or so, a report back is done to you all in a formal setting that basically says, hey, you asked us to work on these priority goals and objectives. These are the things that we're doing, and here's what progress we've made. And the reason we recommend that every 3 months or so is because it's long enough to get something done, right? You don't want to cut it too short. You want to have the chance to really get some legs underneath what you're trying to do, but it's not so far down the road that you can't course correct if you want. So if the board has and agrees with the objective of develop a marketing strategy for communication, for example, the staff goes off and in their professional opinion, their subject matter expert opinion, they come up with some action plans. As a board, you're going to get to hear at the very latest 3 months from now as to that progress and what steps they're taking. And then you can say, well, did you think about this? Or what about that? Or gosh, that's exactly what we thought you should be doing. Great work. Whatever it is the board needs to do to give feedback and direction to the staff. That was sort of the short version, and you all know I could go into so much more detail because I love this stuff, but I'm going to stop there. Any questions or any thoughts or feedback for me?
And I'll highlight that a lot of this was done during our our implementation plan meetings, and I think there's going to need to be another round because it was a lot to take in the first time, just like for the board. So we want to take another dive, let staff think about it once they see this. I think it'll help them think and like, oh, I'm kind of working on that now with this, or it's going to help them tie a lot of their projects and work into this spreadsheet. So that's why I think the spreadsheet is not going to be like stapled to the document out for the public. It's going to be something that's going to be more of a tracking mechanism, and then something that we could use to report to the board with once the plan is adopted. So I think I'm glad you pulled that up so they could see all that and understand a little bit more about it. So,
Cheryl, because this list is rather long, I imagine that almost every Board of Selectmen's agenda is going to have this as an item, because one or more of those tasks are coming due. Is that correct?
It can be. What we would recommend, given your particular structure, at least right now, or your particular structure, is that some of this work is going to be integrated with your committees, right? Because you have committees working on these very things, or something that's aligned or should be talked about at a committee meeting. So I actually recommend every 3 months, Al. Now, having said that, because you have this document and use it, if the Board of Selectmen ever had a question, boom, you can bring the document up and you can read right off the document, whatever that latest update was. We don't expect this document to be updated daily or even weekly. We expect it to be updated when major things happen, or something new comes along, or some action step is accomplished. That's why we kind of fit that quarterly in there.
How do we, as selectmen, assure ourselves that the tasks are being accomplished, or that the milestones are being met? Can we wait 3 months to do that?
Well, it's a combination of what I would call sort of a best practice and an accepted practice. So obviously it's a best practice that you have professional staff that you've asked or tasked to take this on, or that volunteered to take it on. So there's that trust factor. Hey, they said they were going to do it. I believe them. If I need an update, if I'm feeling, you have that kind of feeling that maybe I should check on it, obviously as a board, it's an accepted practice to ask for a report or an update on it whenever you want. But I think that on some particularly important topics to the board, remember I had you prioritize both within each key focus area and across each focus area. The board may want to, for a while, to feel a certain comfort level about the process and how it's working. You may want to ask for an update on those most important goals across the board at each board meeting. I think that could be a way to accomplish feeling more comfortable as the process gets worked into your culture, as opposed to just be very hands-off. So really it's up to you, Al, but that would be a recommendation for me.
So I think, Al, to your question, I would certainly advocate for a red light, yellow light, green light report that could be published at whatever interval we think it needs to be done. But you go through it, maybe we say we don't need to hear anything about the green projects because they're on schedule, they're on budget. The yellow ones maybe deserve a sentence, what's going on, and the red ones maybe deserve a presentation back to the board. What's happened? And that's a mechanism to report up to us and most importantly, to not surprise us, right? Because we would see a project going from, it's lagging behind to it's critically off track, and give us a chance to talk about it. Going back to the spreadsheet, are you coaching or have the staff had conversations about an accessory document that lists just about everything they can think of that might fit in that category, and then a prioritization, right? So it becomes an exercise in capturing everything that needs to happen, and then saying these are the 3 that we're going to focus on. And we're not going to really worry about the other ones until we've knocked, some of the top ones off.
Yeah, so we tend, and yet the answer is yes. We've had that conversation in brief with your staff. I think, as Peggy has mentioned, this is an opportunity to continue to become more comfortable. I call it mature, sophisticated with the plan. But we think of what you're talking about as sort of in 3 areas. You have your mandated services, right? You've got to do them. It doesn't matter if they're strategic or not. You're required by law to provide those services. Then there are what we call the core services, without which you couldn't provide the mandated services. That's finance, that's HR. Those are the work of government that's, if you don't have that core or that spine, you couldn't do anything else. And then there are what we would loosely call the strategic services. You're not required to provide them, right? You might be, for example, required to provide a certain level of law enforcement. Anything over that would be considered a strategic level of law enforcement for a certain reason. Or, for example, you're not required to provide beaches and recreation services. That's sort of a strategic or expanded piece of services that you've chosen to provide. So the way the current work, those layers of work, fit into what could potentially be some new work takes about 12 months to really figure out how it all integrates. And the board has told us what your priority goals are strategically. Now our work really will be, in my opinion, to find out what my mandated services are, what my core services are, and what my current strategic services are, and how they fit into these priorities. And I might have to come back to you. Let's assume I was a staff member. I might have to come back to you and say, hey, you mentioned in the strategic plan that this is a priority, but that kind of gets in the way of accomplishing this. Can the board help me decide what's truly a priority? Because they can't both be done with our current resources, staffing, and budget. So it's that opportunity to do what you said, take a look across the spectrum. I do not recommend you put every single thing you're doing on a spreadsheet. It's
No,
not.
I'm talking about a companion document that sits aside.
I actually don't recommend that either, and that it could be something that's done for sure, but typically it's not an efficient way. And your staff may have a completely different answer for you, right? But in my experience working in government is that's not an efficient way for me to figure out what I'm doing and what's most of a priority for a staff member to do. but it's certainly something to talk to your staff about, how they feel about that kind of, that incredibly detailed level of documentation.
I mean, I think that what a lot of the more active departments that have projects, I've had them all do project lists. So if you go to Public Works, he's got an Excel sheet. He's got, 20 projects, on there, just big, more substantive things that are time consuming and things like that. So, those types of things. In terms of like the responsibility level, that's really kind of in their job description, right? About how they're spending their time administratively outside of projects. But we do have those project lists for those more intensive departments.
And I like the idea where you may not be headed here, Bruce, but I think you might be. I love the idea of a department work plan or even a department strategic plan for each department, so that they can figure out in their minds what might be most strategic in their, in their piece of this government puzzle, matching it not just up to your strategic plan, the town-wide strategic plan, but also matching it across the organization to other strategic plans. Because having that kind of a conversation allows, number one, communication, but number two, sort of that leveraging of resources. If we're working on something similar, or we see some efficiency, by knowing that, we can make that happen.
Well, I wasn't going there yet. I would have gotten there. I think what I was trying to do is we can't have a big long list of in our implementation. It would be overwhelming. Correct. But it would be helpful for us to see the scope, the universe of projects within a department, and then to see the prioritization that staff is coming up with, so that we could feel good about it. And certainly capturing a project for a future time at least gives us visibility out over the horizon about what might be coming. So that was what was rooted there. Can
I just interrupt for 1 sec, Bruce? Sorry. I think we want to be careful though, too, that we're not overstepping in terms of, and I'll use the word micromanage. I don't really mean it this directly, but I don't think we want to micromanage the departments too much. I think what I would suggest is something to the effect of like understanding what the critical path tasks are or projects are, things that are higher priority versus lower priority, so that we know that the higher priority ones are getting done. That, obviously if you get those done, then other things can follow as a result of the critical path. But if we focus on, all the projects that a particular department is responsible for, that may get overwhelming for them too, I would think.
No, Scott, I think we are talking about the same thing. We're just saying it a little bit differently. To put a fine point on it, if evaluating sidewalks is a top priority, I want to know what they walked by for other projects to make that one the arrival. I don't want to necessarily debate with them. I want to see evidence that there's thoughtful work going into identifying and prioritizing. And that's it. It's really just that evidence of thoughtful work. I guess
as the Board of Selectmen, do we need to be doing that, or is that something that like Peggy or the First Selectman's office would be doing, in the context of just day-to-day work? I guess I want to be conscious of, how we maximize our meetings. And we haven't historically, I'm not saying that we can't going forward, but historically we really haven't done a lot of like reviews of departments per se, and making sure that they're staying on track with particular projects. That's sort of management tasks.
Well, I definitely think that Peggy's office has got the heavy lifting here. Our role, I would take it very much like a corporate board role, right? We're not looking to get down in the weeds. We're looking to see that the proper
actually we're on track.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Just a process question here. We have a hard stop at 6, right?
I have a hard stop at 6, so I can't go past 6.
And we haven't gotten to the goals.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was saying. We've gotten kind of sidetracked here. So let's move on to task at hand for today. And but I think as we see this evolve, it's going to be discussion, right? We'll figure out going forward what we need, and it'll evolve over time. So with that, let's move on to the goals and objectives that the draft document here.
And if you don't mind, I'll just give you the brief overview. I think you probably know all this, but again, more for the record. The document you have is just showing you the goals and objectives. It's not the whole plan, because I know that's what you wanted to focus on tonight, were the goals and objectives. Based on our conversation of October 12th, we reordered them and we removed or updated some of the wording, especially in the objectives, based on your feedback. If we're able to reach your agreement on these goals and objectives this evening, what will happen is we'll drop them back into your draft plan. We've made all of the other changes that you've requested. And I'm going to work, we have a small group of people, Jen included, that will take a quick look at that plan before it comes back out to you all for a final adoption conversation whenever you're ready to have that. So with that, I'm happy to share screen, or I'm sure you all have it in front of you, whatever would work best, and we can work our way through these at your leisure. Screen's coming. All right, I'm going to make the screen a little bit bigger as well, because, you know, at a certain point I can't read them either. So let me roll back up here. So you should be looking at my Word document. Okay, good. And just taking them from financial and environmental sustainability. You let us know last time, or this is what my notes say. So if this isn't right, it's always a great time to mention it as well. We reordered the goals. So your number one goal is diversify our housing stock. Your number two goal is to ensure stable financial support of Madison's vision. Your number three goal is to preserve and protect our natural and built assets. And your number four goal is to create a balanced tax base. Now, having said that, for the record, it's very difficult to prioritize these goals. And that doesn't mean goal 2, 3, and 4 aren't important. It simply means that I asked you to make sure that we gave the staff clear direction. If you were going to spend your time, money, resource, and energy on one of these goals, this would be the first one to start with. It's not that the others won't be worked on. Sometimes they integrate. Sometimes they fall in domino fashion. Sometimes you can work on one and you have to stop and you can work on another. So I want to be clear that that does not mean that goal 2, 3, and 4 won't be worked on. So then let's just take the objectives. Right now, the objectives in order are modify zoning and regulations to allow for more housing diversity, and implement the recommendations in the housing study and plan. So if you have any feedback about additional objectives, and if we could stay at the objective level, that would be really helpful, not to talk about specific actions, because that would be another one of those 4 to 6 hour meetings to talk about actions. And we really did put that on the shoulders of the staff to come up with action steps on how to implement what you want them to do.
I want to sign up for a 4 to 6 hour meeting.
So I'm still struggling with the goal, diversify our housing stock. That feels more like a means and not an end. Why do we want to diversify our housing stock?
So this has been one of the major topics that came up on all the community, the visioning session, the retreat, the surveys. This is one of the major issues that, you know, the town is concerned about. And so that there is a lack of choice. Our housing is heavily weighted towards single family homes. And so it was deemed as an important goal.
But why is single family home zoning bad for Madison?
You know, Bruce, this has been through multiple conversations that we got to this, and then but this was actually listed at our last meeting when we talked about this.
I think I struggled with it back in that meeting too. And we said, we'll put a stick a pin in it and talk about it in this meeting.
Well, I'm just trying to think, were you at the visioning? Yeah,
I'm saying that it doesn't feel like a goal. It feels like a means to an end. If the goal is to create affordable housing in Madison,
That's not the
or and when I say affordable, I'm not using the term of art like subsidized housing. I'm just saying, more affordable, more obtainable.
I know, but I think it's
honestly, that's not the goal
options.
either. I know. Sorry, Peggy.
Yeah.
I'll step back. I was just gonna. If you look back at all of the community engagement and you look back at all of those meetings and you look back at the survey and then the conversation we had during the retreat, it was about the diversity of housing stock. It was not focused on affordability. Although affordability was a small part of the conversation was around, we don't have housing stock for, say, single seniors or a senior couple that wants to stay but doesn't want a 4-bedroom house anymore. We don't have the type of housing stock that, say, young professionals who work from home would. There's nothing there. There's nothing available. So it wasn't focused on that single family housing is bad. It simply said that if we want, and the statement was that we do want a wide range of diversity in the people that live here, families, seniors, young couples, individuals, then we need the housing stock available for them to rent or purchase to live in. That was this focus. Does that help at all, Bruce?
Well, it does, but I mean, I think that runs headlong into all of the objections we hear from the community every time somebody tries to build something different than single family housing.
That's the tough needle that we have to try to thread here. But to me, it was loud and clear that from every touch point within the community that people want housing options. I guess I just look at it as we talk about diversity, housing choice, housing options. So and we just don't have that. We just don't have those choices available. People want to stay in town no matter what stage they are in their life, and they're transitioning one way or the other. They wanted options. So, I think so that's the struggle that we're going to have to think about. And affordability did come up quite a bit, but that wasn't the primary complaint, right? It was, I want to stay in Madison, but I don't want my 4,000 square foot house, or I want my kids to move here, but there's nothing that they can really afford, and they don't want a 4,000 square foot house either. They don't have any children, or they like to rent, or so. Or I want my in-laws to move in, and I can't build anything bigger than 800 square feet on my 2-acre lot for them, and that's too small for them. So I'd like to build something that's 1,500 square feet on my 2-acre lot. Those are the conversations I think that we had. So I don't know, Jen, you were at all these sessions as well. So I don't know if you're hearing something.
And also I was just on the Affordable Housing Committee that met at 4:00 today prior to this meeting. And I will say they've been out in the community doing community conversations with different groups throughout town. And that is the feedback that they've been receiving. They've met with several church organizations, trying to meet with the firefighters, that sort of thing. And the feedback that they're getting in terms of housing is the diversity of the housing stock, especially seniors, as Peggy mentioned, wanting to downsize. They want to stay in Madison and don't feel like they have an option for something to downsize into that would be appropriate for them. So I think what we need to be careful about as we're presenting this particular objective is that the community's not confusing diversity of housing with the price point necessarily of the housing, but more so the style of housing that we have available and the size of houses that we have available. Maybe condos or carriage houses, single floor living type of situations, as opposed to necessarily something that's high rise or falls into that scope of,
Right.
What the state is talking about in term, affordable.
And I also think that, by nature, if you talk to any housing experts, the more there's options, it creates affordability in the sense that it gives different price point options, right? Condos tend to be less expensive than, buying a, five bedroom, 5,000 square foot house. So by the fact that we're diversifying what we offer to people, it's giving people price point options. And that's not talking about subsidies. It's not talking about deed restriction or any of that stuff. It's just giving people options within their budget that they could come and move to Madison.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, one of the objectives, it says below that is getting into more affordable housing. We have a Board of Selectmen approved affordable housing plan that Bruce and Scott and Al and former selectman woman Kokaruda endorsed, and that was an affordable housing plan, and that's what the committee's working on, and that comes, I think, under that umbrella. So it's part of it, but it's not all of it, I guess, is what I think we're all saying.
So are we seeing in objective 1 that we're going to direct planning and zoning to modify the zoning laws?
My understanding when we talked in the retreat, and Carol was there, and I know she's been on board with most of these conversations, so is that planning and zoning is already undertaking that. And the idea would be that the council would say to the planning commission, let's make sure your POCD has this strategic objective in mind. And it already does, by the way. And I don't know if Erin's on the call or not, but she's been on board with all of these conversations as well. And that we say to them, it is a goal of the Board of Selectmen to have zoning regulations that allow for more housing diversity. Can you please have a conversation at the planning commission level, planning and zoning, and tell us what you think and make some recommendations so that we're all on the same page when we pass some policies and regulations related to housing diversity. So the basic answer is yes, but it doesn't, as you know, it just doesn't quite. I wish it were that easy, right? But it's never that easy to just say, go forth and make that happen. But
well, I don't think we have the authority to. I think we can give direction and we can give them sort of our sentiment, but ultimately they have the prerogative to do this on their own.
Right. And that's where I agree with you, Bruce. The wording where, it's specifically saying modify seems like it's very directive on our part that, as the Board of Selectmen, we're saying we need to modify these zoning regulations when really and truly that's at the discretion of the Planning and Zoning Committee to look into what they realistically can do. So is there a way that we can modify that?
I mean, I guess though I look at it, this is an objective for the whole town. The planning and zoning is part of the whole town, right? So they're a board and commission for the town. So it's not, so it's not directing, but it's saying our objective is to modify things. So I think the Planning and Zoning Commission should be taking this into heart. They've been participating in the strategic plan. No, regulatorily wise, we can't tell them that, right? I would agree with that. But I feel like this is a pretty powerful statement that they need to take this, this is what we're hearing from the community that needs to be done. And hopefully this is aligning with what the POCD is going to say as well, right? Because that's their
involved in the process,
guidance, right? And that's their regulatory document that they have to follow, technically, because everything is always relating back to the POCD. So, so that's why I don't have an issue with it saying that. I mean, if there's a way that we could say modify that makes you feel more comfortable with it, I'm certainly open to that suggestion.
And
well, I suspect that I'm outnumbered on this one. I'm just going to observe that when we put this to the public, it is vague enough that people will read it with their own context. And I would compare it to goal number 2, which is pretty crisp. And I think everybody will read it pretty much the same way. So when we do roll it out this way, I think we just better be prepared for people to react to it in their own context. And that was my point in bringing it up. Is there a way for us to tighten up this language to better reflect the goal?
I
So,
agree with you, Bruce,
I mean,
because
do you have a suggestion of language? Because I think the idea here is to complete and have something that we're gonna send to the public. So I'm totally open to ideas. What suggestions do you have, Bruce, specifically?
Well, I mean, I think what I heard is the goal is really to have a greater variety of options for housing in Madison. We're not diversifying for the sake of diversifying. We're diversifying because people want choices.
Not what it says.
So
Like
something,
It would just
offer
change
something
more
the-
along
housing
that way.
choices. I mean, I can understand that. Maybe the word diversify, people are interpreting in a different way.
I think there's a good chance that people will, yeah, that people will read that.
So,
I agree with you, Bruce,
yeah,
that language is important here. So
Yeah.
I was trying to, the word stock was bothering me. Like I didn't understand what it meant. Like it was too like consultative.
create
speak.
more,
So,
how, I'm just trying to get down to this, and let's
Yeah.
say, create more housing options
perfect.
for residents.
Yeah.
I think that
Okay,
Or
that's-
explore.
I think that's
more.
what our goal is, really, right?
Yeah.
I would
and
just
how
say,
about that word
wait, can I stop you all here?
Yeah.
John,
And-
are we
and-
down in a rabbit hole here?
Yeah, and I understand. I think I understand some of what's going on, but I want to point something out here. This document, what you have in front of you, was created after months and months and months of work. And hundreds of people have seen and approved this very language in this very format that you're looking at tonight. It is entirely your purview to go through and change word by word, but you will not be able to do that by 6 o'clock. It is currently 5:39 and you are one objective into one goal. So I think what we need to do is stop here for a second and just take a moment and figure out what you as a board really want to do with this document this evening. And if it really is, and it's entirely your purview, and I will go there with you, no question, go word by word and change it. I would suggest that what needs to happen is that we do that. You
Fine.
individually go through this document word by word. You get it back to me. I craft the Frankenstein version of everybody's changes. And that's the document that we then use to have a conversation, because all of your ideas will be in that document already. And this conversation will go much more quickly for you.
The challenge with any of these documents, we've all seen this, Bruce. We've been through this a billion times with previous strategies too. We could wordsmith the hell out of any document, right? So I think we've got to be careful about going too far down a rabbit hole. Words are important. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I think your point is well taken. Maybe let's take it offline and do any edits that people want to go do. We don't have time in 20 minutes.
yeah, that's
Well,
fine.
Well, with the other option here, I mean, Bruce, we're having a public information session, so I guess we're testing the waters with the language, and if that is the reaction of the public that somehow this is misinterpreted what the goal is, then I guess we can learn from that process, and let's test the waters. And this was vetted. I'm just trying to figure out how to get this. If we go through this and you look at all of this, how many other ones on here do you take issue with the wording? I mean, is this really the one that you feel has the biggest
I think
lightning rod or red flag for the public?
So there's a couple of them, but just a couple that I think are a little awkward and I think we have an opportunity to again tighten them up a little bit. But no, I mean by and large, no, I don't have a problem with every single one. Like I said, goal number 2, I thought was great the way it is. It's easy to understand. It should be goal number 1 in my opinion, but we already took that vote. So no, I mean, if you want to stick with goal 1,
I'm comfortable doing goal 1 with the new language, because I do I hear you on the red flag stuff. I worry as well about people misinterpreting what our objectives are, but I would not want to have to do this for every one of these. That's, I guess, my point. So how does the rest of the board feel? Make that one change for the goal and then, try to keep it not doing that and just refining some of the objectives, which is, I think, what we had talked more about, right?
Yeah,
Today.
that works for me.
Yeah, I'm good moving forward.
Okay.
Yep. Move forward.
Okay. Maybe it would be helpful, especially if we have people listening in, if I come back to goal 1 under financial and environmental sustainability is to create more housing options within the community. I stayed away from the word residents because what if I wanted to move?
Right.
So
Yep,
objective
that's fine.
1.1,
Yep.
modify zoning and regulations to allow for more housing diversity. And I'm going to pause after I say each one of these long enough, but not too long. So I'll wait about 3 to 5 seconds. And if you want to hop in here, that'll be when you hear me like be quiet, hop in here. So modify zoning and regulations to allow for more housing diversity. Objective 1.2, implement the recommendations in a housing study and plan.
I did suggest that we actually refer to the actual, say, implement the recommendations in the Board of Selectmen approved affordable housing plan, because it's a formal document that the state required us to do. So I was trying to tie that specifically to that.
Any objections to that amendment?
Nope.
I feel like Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay, I got a real quick check on something, but go.
Goal number 2 under financial and environmental sustainability reads, ensure stable financial support of Madison's vision. Objective 2.1, align budgets to strategic goals. Objective 2.2, map line items to strategic goals. Goal 3, preserve and protect our natural and built assets. Objective 3.1, improve resiliency of our coastal assets. Note, this is a reword. There were some things in, parentheses and a whole lot of et ceteras here that I just combined.
Looks great.
Objective 3.2, provide a safe and accessible waterfront. Objective 3.3, preserve and save the coastline.
So that one, I know what our sentiment was, but I felt like a lot of people might think it redundant with 3.1. Because I know one is talking about our assets, right? Which is our beaches and our housing stock and everything along the coast. And this is more about, maybe I'm the only one.
I think Aaron made a point about this resiliency being different than preserving or preservation. I think the resiliency issue was around climate change, perhaps. That's what I remember in my little brain. And maybe that would be different enough, or maybe not.
I tend to agree. I think 3.1 and 3.3 is confusing. I don't think the average Joe will know the difference between the two.
Nuance, yeah. Improve resiliency of our coastal assets and natural coastline or something.
So theoretically, it might say preserve, save, and improve resiliency of our coastal assets.
Right.
Which
would be natural and built.
Yeah.
And then I felt like we're missing, though, we have Rockland Preserve, we have a lot of parks and trails, we have a lot of other, our whole environment, our wetlands. So something to capture that.
Yeah, Peggy, I think we missed, maybe it was so obvious nobody thought of it, but preserving open space.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
That makes more sense.
For anybody who is listening audibly, it says preserve new objective 3.3 to replace the old objective. Preserve open space, parks, and trails as an important part of the community.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, and as always, remember, this won't be the last time you'll see this. Obviously, you'll get a chance to adopt it, but this is a plan that should be a living document. And when you meet about it every year as a board, you can say to yourselves, hey, does this still make sense? Did we miss something? Should we reward it, right? You can do this once a year at probably at most for a while until it becomes, again, mature enough that you don't feel the need to do that. Goal number 4, create a balanced tax base. Objective 4.1, attract a wider variety of businesses and business locations. By the way, these icons that you see here are the new latest version of the icons. Thanks to Jen and Carol and Rita for that. But here's your high-performing government key focus area. Goal 1, ensure a well-informed and participatory community. Several objectives here. Objective 1.1, develop a marketing strategy for communication. Objective 1.2, make a connection between taxes and the value for the cost. Objective 1.3, execute the strategic plan. Objective 1.4, ensure representation of diverse groups in all areas of government. And objective 1.5, promote ownership of the community.
Yeah, that one I was a little struggling with what we were trying to get at there. I don't remember the
We were trying to say that our community should take ownership in the ways that they want to participate and communicate with us, that it's not a one-way street where we're constantly communicating and trying to get people engaged, that one of the things that we should be trying to do is to get people to do that with us. We want them to step forward of their own volition and communicate with us and participate in events without being asked to, and step up and say, hey, I want to be on that board and committee, taking that ownership of the community themselves.
Does that resonate with the rest of the board? I just, I thought it was a little tough to, I mean, I'm fine with it, but I just.
I don't think the words written here convey the thought that was so eloquently expressed by Cheryl.
I guess a lot of times we would use that term invested in the community rather than ownership of the community. Is that more we're all invested in it in some way? But is that better? And I'm not trying to say that it's any better or worse, to be honest. So I'll defer to the rest of the board on this.
But could investment be misinterpreted as dollars?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, when I think of ownership, I do think of like the personal level of involvement that folks have with different organizations within town, or volunteer civic groups, or, you know, our missions and whatnot that we have.
Yeah.
Adding involvement helps clear it up, I think.
Yeah.
I like that. That was a good idea.
Okay.
Good job, Jen.
Thanks. 2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs up.
Got both thumbs. All right. Goal number 2, attract and retain a high-performing workforce.
Great.
Objective 2.1, staff is known for professionalism and expertise. Objective 2.2, establish consistency in service delivery.
Can we tweak one thing on 2.1? Should we say anything about, I guess service delivery is the next one. I was going to say professionalism, expertise, and service, but maybe it's already covered in 2.2.
Yeah. Well, and I think
we're breaking them apart. Do we need to break them apart?
Well, I think the consistency to me is important because you have to treat everybody the same in government, right? You can't have So I guess I like that consistency. I don't know if that captures that sentiment
You
well.
get 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. One is professionalism, one is expertise, and one is service delivery, because there are three very different things that you would attack with very different thing. One is training, one is, customer service experience. I don't know.
I do like the idea of breaking that into three distinct objectives.
Thumbs up.
2 thumbs up, Scott. Don't forget the other one.
Something, oh,
I brought
sorry.
it.
My little thumb made that happen. Staff has the skills and expertise, has needed skills and expertise or something is where I need to go somewhere with that. That's what I need to do. Okay.
Like it.
Cool.
I put a note here. This note in italicized is me. We talked about this a bit last time. Goal number 3 says support educational excellence in our public school system. We had a long conversation about whether this is a value or a critical success factor because of your somewhat limited ability to have any direct impact except through the budget on educational excellence. I would err toward the side of letting it be a goal and see how it unfolds rather than move it to something of a lesser, focus within the strategic plan. So this will,
Yeah, I agree.
To your point that you made earlier, Peggy, it's a town goal. It's still, the Board of Ed is part of our town.
It is, yeah, it is very important to folks who moved here, the schools themselves. So, it's true, it's hard. We can't, as a Board of Selectmen, do anything about curriculum or anything like that, but, making, adequate space in the budget to promote, the quality of the school systems. And
I think that's what you added last time, Jen, were these 2 specific, because they weren't here before. You all added objectives.
Okay.
Yeah,
One,
we added
adopted
CIP
CIP.
in particular, because that's important. The investment in the facilities and the programs we help with the facilities. So,
and then 3.2 was, of course, adopt an annual budget. So those were 2 that you added last time. Okay. And then finally, modernize governance structure. And that was your goal number 4. Objective 4.1, ensure government is aligned with best practices. Objective 4.2, evaluate the town manager form of government.
So I would move to strike 4.2 entirely.
So I think we talked about this.
Yeah.
I think we talked about, there was a lot of conversation about, over the next 10 years, we're going to be, modernizing our governance structure is going to involve looking at the form of town government, right? But we just went through a charter review. So,
we just said evaluate other forms of town government.
And
I think town manager is in there, so.
And part of this could just be things that we do within the, for example, 2 years ago, we did a reorganization and we made things more efficient, consolidating some departments that made sense to make it more efficient. So getting rid of the silos. So those are things that, is modernizing our government structure also. So trying to capture that kind of stuff. And then getting rid of 4.3 as well.
Bruce, does that address your issue if it now says evaluate other forms of town government?
No, because we have a process and a mechanism in place to do this. And I wouldn't be comfortable continually. We've asked and answered this question twice in the last 10 years. And the answer has been consistently back. The taxpayers like the form of government that we have. And now we're turning around and saying, well, we're going to look at it again. And I think that it sends the message we didn't like the answer they gave us, so we're just going to continue to ask the question.
So
other forms of town government could be like shared services, couldn't it? I mean,
right.
that's
I know,
still
there's a lot
okay.
of
Then all of that falls into 4.1 best practices.
I'm fine with that. I mean, I don't feel strongly about this.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take 4.2 and 4.3 out, but there will be a point in time over the next 10 years, we're going to be going back and looking at our form of government again, because we have to we should be looking at our charter. It's a living document ultimately in the next 10 years. So
Agreed. And as a living document, we'll have the opportunity in the future to add things into this document. But I don't
Yeah,
think
and I
on
do
day
remember
one,
during the town charter review process, I know it's something they talked about, but they felt that they couldn't really hold any in-depth discussion on because there was so much that needed to be updated with the charter before anything could be talked about in terms of form. The town charter review committee really felt like that needed to be its own standalone committee if there was going to be a discussion on it and not to be a part of the charter review.
But it still could be, in theory, I mean, all of what you just said is an objective of our town, though, right? To still consider it, whether it's a part of the charter review, whether it's part of a committee, it's still something we're going to consider.
and I would argue that it's, part of best practices.
I guess the point is we want to keep the eyes on the ball, right? We want to make sure we don't lose the focus on it too.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Uh,
I can go either way. I don't feel that strongly about it.
This doesn't say, evaluate other forms of government like a representative town meeting or a mayor and city council form of government. It says town manager. We're gonna look at this
No,
one
I
option.
thought we struck that. We struck that.
You're
Yeah.
yeah. If you're looking at the document, I struck 4.2 and 4.3. So if you're
Yeah.
good with that, let's just move on. Scott's got to leave us
Okay.
in 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding that when you say ensure government is aligned with best practices, that allows you to bring this conversation up.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Another way to do it, Bruce, was evaluate other forms of town government and leave it generic. And again, that still points to a process that we have in place anyway. So I don't care either way. So
80% rule.
Objective
Yeah.
4.2 says restructure committees for alignment with strategic plan and resources.
Yep.
Mhm.
Objective 4.3, actively encourage a diverse and inclusive community that feels open to all. All right, Scott, because I know you have to leave, was there anything else down below here that you really want to talk about before you go? We've got modern and innovative infrastructure, we have safe and healthy community, and we have thriving business and economy.
Nope.
Okay, we'll just keep moving forward then. Modern and innovative infrastructure, your number one goal was to provide improved town and school facilities. Objective 1.1, ADA accessibility for all town facilities by December 31st, 2030. Objective 1.2, ensure modern schools.
Okay, I do have an issue with, I don't know if we're ready to put a date in there. I mean, that is a huge, I know we have a report that goes through all this, but it is a huge undertaking when you understand all that's involved with ADA. It's down to door handles. It's not just, ramps. It's a lot of stuff, and it's all good stuff that we're trying to do. I'm just not comfortable with a date where we can really, is that achievable? I would think it would
any objections to removing the date?
No.
I'm going to start pulling the headline routine on y'all.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sounds great.
Okay, ensure modern schools that have technology investments. This was kind of a big deal. That's why technology is pulled out specifically. This now becomes 1.3. Fund appropriate storage for public works. And provide workspace for town operations. Goal number 2, then we had a conversation about utility connectivity because we originally were talking about broadband, remember? So we changed it to utility here. Goal number 2, build reliable utility connectivity through networks and infrastructure. Objective 2.1, attract new cellular service companies to encourage competition and excellent service. And this was something I think Al brought up. In objective 2.2, improve the electrical service to reduce outages throughout the community. Goal number 3, improve transit for all modes of transportation. So even if an objective doesn't address it, this allows you to put add objectives at a later date, if that's appropriate, that would address other types of transportation, i.e. flying cars. Objective 3.1, partner with the state for transportation. Objective 3.2, establish route to and from North Madison and Route 1. Objective 3.3, connect north of train to train station. And objective 3.4, improve pedestrian options for connectivity.
I would just maybe put bicycle and pedestrian options for connectivity.
Yeah, and maybe the same with 3.2 in that same regards, because I think people, you know, might look at that and say, well, what about, that's what Route 79 is.
I think, isn't this we were talking bus originally, right? Establish bus, bicycle, and pedestrian routes. Is that what you want to say, Jen?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was, but I also think bus, because we're talking to having some sort of service. There's also micro transit that we're talking about connecting through a micro transit system. So it's almost, yeah.
Perfect. Safe and healthy community. Your number 1 goal was to foster a connected community through increased engagement. We had a lot of conversation about this and a whole bunch at the retreat as well. And I think Scott would say it better than I, but the idea here is that if you're connected to your neighbors and connected to your community, that creates a safer and healthier environment. And the way to do that is to sort of increase engagement, have people know their neighbors, have people connected to their community.
Mhm.
So objective 1.1 was to generate relationships and partnerships within the community. Goal number 2, a strong perception of safety from everyone in the community. Objective 2.1 there would be to invest in public safety equipment and staffing. And objective 2.2 here, safer access for pedestrians and bicyclists townwide. Goal number 3, increase access to affordable physical and mental health care by 2035.
I think this one
It's rather
is,
specific.
yeah, I think that is
tough.
one.
get rid of the
with a lot
2035.
conversation, yeah, with the date. And then I think, there was a lot of discussion about, is this something the town should be responsible for, right? But
Yeah.
we can provide some services here and
Just get rid of the
especially-
dates on all of them.
Yeah, I think we get rid of the dates.
Well, I will
think
tell you, a SMART objective is intended to have dates. So you will have dates in the actual implementation plan, but it's
Yes,
probably a great idea to remove them from the strategic plan to
Mhm.
be a little bit bigger.
yeah, I think they're more appropriate in the implementation plan.
So guys,
Yeah.
see ya.
For me,
Okay.
with goal
Thanks,
3,
Scott.
oh, sorry. For me with goal 3, objective 3.3 is the one, it's really the only one in here that I feel most comfortable with in terms of what the town should be providing versus, what comes with state level initiatives. I
Well, I-
guess, 3.1, we have folks in town that could help to identify priority gaps.
I think this is all about access, Jen. Remember the conversation? This was really Scott had this long conversation about, to him, this truly meant access. It meant access in those 3 ways. Can I actually get there, right? Is
Mhm.
there a bus? Is there a path? If I don't own a car, how do I get to this healthcare? The second is knowledge. Do I know anything about it? And then the third was, is it provided to me in a way that I understand? Is it in my language? Is it, if I don't have a computer or a TV, how do I get this information, right? So I think that's what Scott was talking about when he said, or when we said access in this regard.
Okay.
What I hear
And-
you saying is you might want to make this the first objective.
Yes.
And then I would change this bus route to just be support, transportation, because we have our senior services buses. We can, there's different ways we can expand or enhance the transportation that we help, our seniors with. So I think support transportation choices to, medical facilities. Or
Yeah, I like the term medical facilities as
Yeah.
opposed to just specifically the hospital, because there's a lot of different
doctor's
avenues.
appointments, and
Yeah.
that's what we do help a lot of seniors do. And I think there's also ways to improve that and expand it.
Mhm.
So the theory might then be that our goal, increase access to affordable physical and mental health care. Objective 3.1, increase community awareness of public health opportunities and benefits.
Mhm.
Objective 3.2, identify priority gaps in access. And objective 3.3, support transportation choices to medical facilities.
I'm happy with that, with those changes.
Did we lose Bruce too? We did.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
had to
he-
also hard stop at 6.
And then finally, the thriving business and economy. Goal 1, ensure that business development and growth meets the needs and values of the community. Objective 1.1, make Madison a model for values-driven business development and support.
That one I didn't quite understand, and I know there was somebody had suggested this, and I don't get this one. A
So-
model for values-driven business development.
So, yeah, the conversation is,
sorry, go ahead.
as I say, the conversation as I remember it was that we talked about, instead of saying small town values, right? What are they? What do they look like? What do they feel like? Whose small town are we talking about kind of conversation? What we wanted to do was have this community drive this conversation on about what kind of businesses they want in order to educate them. Because they'll say, oh, a Whole Foods, but then they'll say, but we don't want big box, not realizing that a Whole Foods is a big box development.
Mhm.
So as long as we're developing this process, let's develop it in such a way that we do it the best way possible, which means that we would be a model. Other people would copy our approach. And
Right.
that is an example of how to do it right.
Yeah, okay. It was kind of best practices, I guess, in that sense, but okay.
That might be the best wording for it, but I know that was the context or the intent behind it.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
Objective 1.2, build infrastructure to support business growth.
Mhm.
Objective 1.3, address needs of home-based businesses. And objective 1.4, fund sufficient, safe, and healthy wastewater management.
Yep.
And by the way, if you're listening in, wastewater management could mean septic systems. That is a
Yes.
form of wastewater management. I don't want anybody to think that this means that there won't be septic systems downtown. It could mean that, but that's not the intent of the statement. Goal number 2, ensure a thriving business community. Objective 2.1, develop a balanced distribution of business districts throughout town. Objective 2.2, maximize shop local and local spending by meeting the needs of the community. I don't like a slash mark. I just changed it to an and, if that's okay.
Mhm.
Objective 2.3, interact with local businesses to ensure a business-friendly environment. That sort of personal touch. Goal 3, nothing. There's no point there. Goal 3, create a variety of quality cultural and recreational opportunities for all. Objective 3.1, create tax incentives to attract recreation-centered businesses. Objective 3.2, establish a policy for public and private partnerships. This is one that came up during our meeting on the 12th. I think this was yours, Peggy. Goal
Yes.
number 4.
Go ahead.
2 thumbs up. Goal number 4, foster a thriving tourism industry. I put a note here because this is hyper specific, and to your direction, even tonight, increase tourism spending by 25%. That may actually be a measurement. It could also be an objective. but it's so specific that typically something this specific is a measurement and not an objective.
Mhm.
So this foster a thriving tourism industry. I mean, it really is kind of following, it kind of crosses over to quality cultural and recreational opportunity. Well,
People come and visit you for all sorts of reasons.
right.
Part of why they
Right.
visit you is obviously your beach and the Hammonasset State Park. Part of why they visit you is because you have unique shops and restaurants. Part of why they probably visit you is because there's a game. Their kids are in a sports activity that's held in your community. The question is how else can we bring people into the community? Tourists are great. They're like me. They bring their money in and then they go away. So usually we are a benefit to the economy as opposed to a drain on the economy, as long as you don't become a spring break location, right? Which nobody wants to do.
But I think that's what, like, I think a lot of people, and we had a lot of conversation, I think everybody agreed that this is, we're becoming a destination for a lot of different reasons. And this concept of tourism, we don't want the spring break crowd, right? So that's why the focus is on things like agritourism, hiking,
Market
those
support, recreational, historical,
cultural assets, right? Yeah.
Events that will attract visitors and lodging for tourists within the town.
So, and I think that spend, I would not have a goal like that. I think that, like you said, is something that would fall out of all these things at the end where we would target something. But yeah.
And I know that you all have, a tourism partner. You have multiple tourism partners around as well that can help you with this too. I'm going to read these really quickly just for the record, and then we can be done unless you want to talk about something else. But that makes objective 4.1, develop agritourism as an attraction. 4.2 is market, support, and leverage town, recreational, historical, and cultural assets to create opportunities for tourism. Objective 4.3, create events that will attract visitors. And objective 4.4, encourage lodging for tourists within the town.
Yeah.
Now,
okay.
Because both Scott and Bruce had to leave us, there may be a process that you all want to work out whereby I send this fully marked up document and a nice clean one your way, and you can contemplate it and maybe set a time frame for any additional board feedback that would change specific words or add objectives. And once that date has passed, I'll take a look at the document, and Peggy, maybe you and I can decide whether or not we need additional meetings, or if that meeting on the 13th, if there's small enough word changes that the meeting on the 13th would be still a go for adoption.
Okay. Okay.
If that's the case, are you all okay with saying something like, oh, let me see, the 13th? If we said, ooh, election day, yikes. Should we wait till after election day, or should we make it the 6th at close of business for comments?
I would make it probably the 8th.
Not a problem. The rest of the document will be ready to go. And if there are any minor word changes, that's really easy to do. That does mean, though, that an actual document to see. So I guess that's my final question. If you want to see a document with this language in it, I can get that to you probably by the 6th with no problem. Maybe the 7th at the latest. So you can see a document before you talk about it on the 13th.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that the 80% rule. I think we just need to get something out there, and because otherwise we might go through another cycle. So I think you send this out. If you want to make a hard stop on Tuesday because you need it to get the document completed, that's fine. I don't think anybody's going to make any changes from here, and it's just more to catch something. It's just these pages, right? So I
Yeah,
send
these are
it.
the pages that would change, but it is nice to have enough time to see the full document too, because you might
Yes.
notice something in the full document. So let me make sure I get the graphic. I'll send this immediately out to Jacqueline. The second we get off this meeting, I'll send this out to Jacqueline. And she can forward both the markup version that you watched me work on and the clean version. And she can forward that to all of you. And I'll put on the top of it, get back by say the 8th at, close of business. But we'll drop this language into the document as is, because if we need to make minor changes, it's super easy to do late in the game. And then I can get you the actual strategic plan probably by Monday or something like that. Not that anybody's going to read it the day before an election, but you'll have it.
Nor the day after, maybe either. All right. Well, I think we've got something that is good to take to the public, and I think it's reasonable, and I think there was some good changes today. So I appreciate all your
good work.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all's good humor in going through this. I know how important it is, right? Because this is yours, right? And it's clearly yours. All the changes you've made, it's clearly yours. So certainly no one did this for you sitting somewhere else. I love Scott's comment about stock sounded like consultant talk. It probably was, by the way, but this is going to clearly be yours, which I think is really the best thing about a document like this. It might not be perfect, and it's almost impossible. And don't let perfection get in the way of progress, because if you do, then you'll almost get bogged down.
Okay. So
Right.
we do need to actually open this up for citizens' comments, just in case it is on the agenda. And I noticed there had been, I think, 2 citizens on, but or there may be. So Jacqueline, any hands raised?
There's 2 residents on, and I'm
Okay.
not seeing hand raised. I'll just give a second. Nope, you're good.
Okay. All right. So with that, thank you, Cheryl, very much. And thank you for everybody and your input. And with that,